Good. How are you? Ready whenever y'all are.
It's just an extra. Just two. Ready?
Taylor.
Taylor.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
There's 8 of us here.
Yep. All right. I'm not waiting for anything here. I'm not waiting for anything up there. Just we're good to go.
Do we need to do anything starting?
How many times? What's the over under of how many times I ram that tonight? Well, yours is in a yours is in a more precarious. That's precarious. You're right. What's that? Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'll now call to order the Tuesday, November 8th, 2022 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Good evening, commissioners. Please remember that we're over in the Kane Room tonight and you have microphones in front of you. So make sure that if you're speaking, you have your microphone on so that all your comments will be on the record. We will turn to item 2, public comment, public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up this evening for public comment or public hearing?
No, sir, we don't.
All right, thank you very much. Then we will move on to item 3A, consideration of an action on the minutes of the October 27, 2022 meeting. Commissioners, you have minutes in your packets. Any revisions or comments on the minutes?
I do.
Okay.
I think there's a list that is provided on page 3 of 4. And it lists 7 items that were that are included are not on that list.
Okay, so you're on, just to locate, you're on the public hearing, section 4A, and then at the bottom of that, there's a list of 7 items.
Yes.
And you believe there are 2 other items that were not considered included
3.
in that? Okay, what were they?
We had said that to look at parking lot trees.
Okay.
We had talked about screening of above ground utilities, and we had talked about trash dumpster location and quantities.
Okay, is that everyone else's recollection as well? All right. I think on that, what I would do is I would entertain a motion, unless there are any other changes, to approve the minutes with those 3 modifications added. Are we all good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Then I'll move that we approve the minutes of the October 27, 2002 meeting with the addition of the 3 items described by Commissioner DeWood to section number 4A and consistent with the recollection of all the commissioners present.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion and a second from Vice Chairman Simeon. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Sabna?
Yeah, I already said aye.
Okay, good. Then it passes. All right, then we've got that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, commissioners. Thank you, Commissioner DeWood, for the additions. Next is item 4A, review of and discussion on Planning and Zoning Commission's roles and responsibilities. Good evening, Lisa.
We will be giving you your requisite overview of roles and responsibilities of the team. On how people considerations, looking at our role responsibilities, responsibilities, under various state, city, other employees, policies and procedures, talk about in general for the topics and work that institutions and then we conducted city council policy that requires all boards and she's our newest member to the planning commission. And then also just want to extend a congratulations for the fact that you all know as part of the union process. City council considered your appointments, and so Matt Elder, Taylor Landine, Stephen Levine, and so they all have terms. You all have terms that are going to September 30th, 2024. And then annually, as it happens, they also appoint the chair. So elders and if your name is not listed up there, that means that you are so good and that you have another year in your future. I'm going to deal with so, kind of a bit of a departure from what I've probably covered in the past, but wanted to kind of let you all know internal changes that we kind of have the full range of development process. From the long range planning side, so the big picture visioning, long-term master planning content, all the way to through the development process, helping with stewarding our development community through the development process, so site plan, zoning processes. And then we also out with us is our permitting and building inspection. So the actual plan review of vertical construction, utility, and then the actual inspection. To kind of realign and refocus my department with some of the core responsibilities that we have, but also in an effort to focus on what we know as priority. From a permitting standpoint, organized our group and kind of three buckets, if you will. So Ruth Blomer, she kind of always researched in the role that she has now become the title of assistant director. She is focusing on long-range planning and strategic planning. So still continuing comp plan, master planning, and all of the full-time work on the implementation side of a lot of those plans and the action items. She's been with us and she has served in several different roles, and she's obviously a lot through the development process. She is now promoted into director role as well, focusing on development planning and services. So within her group are still the traditional kind of planning focus. Kind of the last bucket, if you will, is our building inspections and plan review.
Burn. Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay. So the last bucket there is our building inspections and plan review group. So again, focusing on the vertical construction, the plan review of those documents as well. So currently, Joshua Doyle, he is serving in the deputy building official role for that. So just wanted to kind of highlight that. And obviously you see some of their titles and maybe have seen some of the changes on agendas and so forth, but Just wanted to formally recognize and congratulate them. Maybe it's a congratulation, I'm not sure, but yeah. So, getting on to kind of the other standard things. So the city council appoints the Planning and Zoning Commission members. You serve in 2-year staggered terms. And then, as I mentioned previously, the chair and vice chair are appointed annually, so they serve in 1-year terms. The specific authorities for having a planning and zoning commission come to us from the state. There's language that municipalities shall appoint a zoning commission to exercise zoning powers granted to a city from the state. And then more specifically at the local level, we have our city charter and our code of ordinances. They touch on some of the same things, but the city charter formally created and established the Planning and Zoning Commission for the city. It set the terms, establishes the roles, the duties, responsibilities of this board. It establishes that you are a recommending body to the city council on most of the things that come before you. But you do have a final authority on one function, and that is the platting process, subdivision plats. The Sugar Land Code of Ordinances also touches on some of the similar things, but it categorizes the commission as administrative board. So that means you have some final decision-making authority, as it just mentions, sets the terms, defines how the appointment process is handled, and what the role of the chair and the vice chair play. It also establishes your attendance expectations and outlines how voting and compliance with any conflicts of interest that are guided by state law, how those apply to you. It also specifies that this is a voluntary board. You are serving without any compensation. You may not hold any other public office that has authority within the city or even the ETJ limits. There are 3 chapters specifically within state law, within the Texas Local Government Code, that really address and guide essentially the work that we can do at the city level related to planning. So those are Chapter 211, which addresses all of the zoning regulations and how a city can have zoning regulations. Chapter 212, which focuses on the subdivision regulations and the processes and procedures that we need to conform to. And then Chapter 213, which outlines how a city can have a comprehensive plan, and we'll touch on some of these more throughout the rest of the presentation and how they apply. So kind of getting to some more housekeeping things, the attendance. So members are expected to be available and to attend most meetings. We know that can't attend all. You have lives and jobs and things outside of the city. And so we definitely are appreciative of the time that you do spend with us. And we know that it is a lot of your personal time, but we do ask, and it is expected that you try to attend most meetings. If you become unable to attend most meetings, then you should either submit your resignation to the city, and a replacement will be appointed. Also note that City Council does have the authority to dismiss any member for poor attendance. And essentially, after 3 consecutive meetings, missing those without kind of being unexcused, that essentially is just deemed as an automatic resignation from the board, from the commission. So in terms of your duties and your responsibilities, so again, as I mentioned, you take action on some things, and then you are recommending to the city council on most things. So you take action, you approve with conditions, or you disapprove with specific reasons, subdivision plats. You are the final stop at the city level related to platting, subdivision regulations. Applying our subdivision regulations. You do make recommendations to the city council whether to approve or disapprove any proposed changes in the specific zoning regulations of our development code, map changes, rezonings, those types of things, conditional use permits, any master plans that are being updated or amended, the city's 5-year capital improvements plan, and then any other special or specific duties that the city council may direct us to work on. touching on just a little bit more specifics of the role of approving or denying plats. This again is limited discretion. We have the development code, which outlines the very specific things that have to be complied with. We also have adopted policies and procedures that touch on the graphic requirements that are required to be part of the plat that is presented to the city for approval. That includes things like master notes. If that plat does meet state law and the development code, then it must be approved. Any conditions in recent state law changes, any conditions of approval or reasons for denial have to be specifically cited at the time of making the motion. So that is why I know we don't do a lot of those anymore. Platting has dramatically dropped off as something that comes before the commission. But we have to be able to address state law requirements, we have provided and prepared that platting documents that can be used as a reference. And so every time we do have a plat come forward, we'll definitely try to, and we will provide that to you so that you can use that as a reference guide. Yes.
So even though we are only allowed to disapprove or deny based upon a code, are we allowed to ask for certain things of the developer on the plat? Because I know in the past we've asked them for things outside of the code. We didn't say specifically, if you don't do this, we're going to deny it. Mm-hmm. We just said, well, we'd like to see this on the plat, or we'd like to see this road is kind of, these lots are kind of, mm-hmm. There's kind of language. Yeah. Is that no longer allowed to be? Because it seems like we don't do anything now except rubber stamp a plat.
Right. Unless we have something specific in our code to cite as to why it is not meeting, it is deficient in meeting that expectation or that requirement, then we cannot. Now, I know in the past we have development community that tries to be as responsive as possible. There's always, I guess, that possibility of the ask, but unless we have to cite, we have to tie it directly to a requirement in our code in order.
Request, but we can't make it a condition of denial.
Correct.
Request it, right?
You could request it, but even then, you have to cite some part of the code where it is not. Right. It's not complying.
And I would add, if I may, I mean, what is in the code is pretty wide ranging, right? Stuff has to be displayed correctly on the plat. Yeah. The legend has to be correct. All the call outs have to be correct. I mean, for the overwhelming majority of the stuff that I think that we see, it probably is possible to link that to a provision in the development code.
Potentially. Now, in the kind of instance of wanting to maybe redesign or something like that, that's where it gets a little tricky in terms of, what they are presenting, especially if it is full compliance. That's where that gets a little more difficult. Yeah.
So we can challenge isn't the right word. We can ask or maybe request of them how they arrived at a certain thing on the plat.
Potentially, but then again, if it is in alignment, if it is complying with the requirement, doing something different, unless it is deficient, we can't require them. Either we can't require it as a condition, or we can't say that, well, because you aren't making this change, even though we know that you're complying, but you're not making this change that we feel could be better or something, and therefore we're going to deny it. That's where we get into really tricky ground.
If you don't say, like, if somebody expresses their opinion, well, I would have liked to see more green space here, but you just make that statement in the review when the chairman passes around for comment. Are we allowed to say that? Because
you
maybe
say that,
sure,
but don't. I wouldn't.
We can't make it a requirement, but I'm just saying it.
Don't expect that. Essentially, don't expect there to be any change.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Because those get recorded too.
They do.
As they're presented and drawn.
Thank you.
So when you have items that come before you where you are making a recommendation onto City Council, we have touched on these before, but hopefully they are helpful in kind of how to guide you in making your recommendation. We ask that you keep the vision of the city in mind. So keeping that all of the long range goals and objectives in mind as you're making your considerations. You are representing community values and perspectives. You all yourselves are residents, but that you also receive public input through public hearing processes and so forth. And so taking that into consideration and how to whether mitigate concerns that you're hearing or if appropriate through the public input process. Being objective, and then lastly, consistency. Having the rules and policies apply to like requests as they come before you is helpful and important. Some other things related to training and education. So one unique element that is outlined in that city council policy for the Planning and Zoning Commission, in addition to your annual orientation, you are the only board that is specifically called out as with a requirement of attending some type of additional training. Typically that is offered through the annual chapter of the American Planning Association, the Texas chapter of the American Planning Association. Thank you to the 3 members that joined us in El Paso in October, just a couple weeks ago. We always try to look for some other comparable options if you aren't able to attend. Those haven't been widely available, but definitely are on the lookout for those. Also through maybe any other types of college or universities or things like that. But we definitely encourage attendance to the chapter conference if possible. Just a plug for next year, 2023. Corpus Christi, I think, was named as the location. Dates are still pending, so we'll definitely keep y'all up to date on that. But hopefully those that were able to attend this year and in the past have enjoyed them. And then we'll bring forward any other training opportunities on topics as either you have requests for specific items. I know with our newest member, if you want anything specific to plating or any other types of processes, we're happy to kind of have some tailored focused training. But if it's something that's helpful as a refresher for the entire commission, we'll definitely do that as well. Also just wanted to touch on we have put together a somewhat loose, but kind of work plan for you and some of the annual items that you will see kind of typically coming before you or the typical times of the year that they will come forward. Springtime, usually the CIP is up for review. And again, you are recommending a body to the city council on that. Typically in the fall timeframe is when our chapter conference is. We'll do our annual orientation shortly after appointment process. And then I know this year we did not do the master plan annual reports that got put on the back burner, but that may get revamped. But that is something because of your role in recommending and reviewing master plans, we definitely want to report out on some of the progress. And so as we kind of look to revamp that, we'll definitely continue to keep presenting those updates to you in whatever form they may take. Also, something unique to this board is city council meetings. So there is an expectation that every meeting there will be a liaison from the Planning and Zoning Commission at city council meetings. We rotate monthly on that. We recently sent out the schedule for 2023. So just if you have any issues with any of the dates that you've been randomly assigned, please let us know. We'll look for somebody else to kind of help out and trade dates, swap out dates. But yeah, just always let us know if something comes up and we'll do our best to try to find somebody to come fill the space. Okay, any questions on that before I turn it over to Ruth? Okay, good, thank you.
Commissioners. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the long-range planning elements of our work. So as Lisa mentioned, the Texas Local Government Code does authorize the city to do comprehensive planning in Chapter 213. It also has the zoning Chapter 211. In Texas, a comprehensive plan is optional. Zoning is also optional. You probably know Houston and some of the other big cities, Pasadena, things like that, places like that don't have zoning. But the local government code does say if you have zoning, then you have to have a comprehensive plan. And if you have a comprehensive plan, you have to follow it. Excuse me. Apologies. So what is a comprehensive plan and what is its purpose? It's a flexible document that guides public decisions and shapes the physical development of a community, usually over a period of about 20 or 30 years. It's created through robust community input, hearing from the community of what their vision for the future looks like. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Part of its purpose is to provide continuity across time and give future public bodies a common framework for addressing land use issues. So you don't have one city council this year going one direction and then a whole new city council another year taking you in a completely different direction. So it kind of provides that common framework across the years. It also helps communities identify issues before they arise. So really kind of looking on beyond their horizon, what's coming, and stay ahead of trends in things like land use development and redevelopment, to help anticipate and navigate those changes in populations and land use patterns. It helps us to protect our resources, whether that's natural resources or historic resources. It also helps us balance competing private interests and protect public investments. I'm so sorry. I've been fine all day long and now I can't stop coughing. So here in Sugar Land, we have a history of comprehensive planning. We've done several of them over the years. Our first one was adopted in, I think it was 1961 or 1964, so shortly after incorporation. Most recently, we adopted an update to chapters 1 through 5 of our comprehensive plan back in 2012. And then you may have heard about the land use plan that was updated back in 2018. But we are going to be engaging in an update to the comprehensive plan coming up very soon. And so some of the goals of the update include incorporating the 2020 census data, defining our community's vision for a post-pandemic and disrupted world. As you know, the world is completely shaken up since COVID. And so we want to hear from the community on, what should the future look like for Sugar Land. We also want to really have some broad community engagement and reach parts of the community that we haven't historically reached through our planning processes. For example, I'm really interested in seeing us go into the schools and talk to kids about what do they want to see? Because if you think about it, they are the future, right? I mean, that's kind of the cliche, right? But I mean, they are the ones that are going to be adults in 20 years. And so what do they want to see in their community? What's going to keep them here or bring them back if they go away for college? We want to dig a little further into our planning framework for kind of the relationship between the comprehensive plan and master plan, strategic planning, and other things that we do as a city, and establish a neighborhood planning process. So now that we're an aging, maturing city, we're not doing greenfield planning anymore. And so what we need to do is kind of look inward and say, what do we need to do for our neighborhoods to make sure that they are as good as they can be and really sustainable in the future? And then finally, really with a focus on implementation. The current plan that we have has some really great goals and aspirational statements, but it doesn't really have a lot of substance in terms of implementation. And so it's kind of hard to know when we're there. And so what we want to do is get some more specifics on implementation. And so what we will be looking for you is to provide feedback on policy recommendations, ultimately be making a recommendation to City Council on the plan. And our kind of kickoff to the effort is some listening sessions that we're doing. Thank you, Christy. Next week. So I'm going to put a plug here. You should have received an email from Michelle. We're looking for your feedback on your availability for next week. If you did not get that email, please let me know. But if you haven't responded, we would really appreciate it if you could let us know your availability so we can get those times finalized as soon as possible. So as I mentioned, the 2018 land use plan was adopted, and through this update, we addressed redevelopment, things like multifamily, the very small amount of remaining vacant areas that we have in the city, including some new land use categories, which those of you who've been around a little bit, you've heard us talk about regional and neighborhood activity centers. We are working on implementation of those areas. So just briefly, broadly, those regional neighborhood activity centers are envisioned to be mixed use areas that have a variety of uses like offices and retail and residential and public spaces, and include multimodal mobility networks. So Town Square is really the best example of that here in the city. Not that we expect that we're going to have a bunch of town squares all over the city, but it's more about the form and how the form is shaped here. And so that the land use plan directed us to look at the best way to implement the regional neighborhood activity centers and, for example, consider creating new zoning districts, or whether to continue using the PD, because right now the only zoning mechanism for doing mixed use is through the plan development process. So we are currently in the process of drafting 2 new zoning districts, mixed use zoning districts. One will be to implement the regional activity centers, and the other will be to implement the neighborhood activity centers. We as staff have been working with a joint Planning and Zoning Commission City Council task force. So we have 3 of the members here, Chairman Gallagher, Ms. Smith, and Mr. Brown, have joined. Members of City Council, we have Mayor Zimmerman, Councilmember Kamali, and Councilmember McCutcheon that have been serving on that task force. And so far we've been doing a lot of sort of education on what is mixed use, why does it matter, how can we implement it through different kinds of zoning regulations. And then most recently, we started to do some community engagement. So we've actually been going to a number of HOA meetings and participated in some city hosted events where we've been talking to people about kind of redevelopment and what it might look like, and different housing that might come along with that, different residential types. And we've gotten some really great feedback from the community. I think overall it's been very positive. People are excited about the opportunities that may come along with this in the future of, having different kinds of housing where people, young professionals can move in a little more easily, or someone who doesn't want their big 4,000 square foot home anymore can kind of downsize. So your role in this project is to provide input on the recommendations on the zoning districts. We anticipate bringing forward some draft code to you for council and P&Z to review together in sometime in the spring. We haven't pinpointed that timeline yet, but anticipate having that for you. So another part of what we are involved with is the master plans. Master plans are kind of considered elements of the comprehensive plan. So they take the big picture of the comprehensive plan and kind of sort of narrow the focus. So we've got a few master plans that are currently, updates are underway. Lisa mentioned earlier the master plan annual report. So this is something we typically will bring to you each year that provides the status of the master plans. It documents the implementation, kind of how we're doing with the different projects, and helps make that connection between master plans and the capital improvement program. And then also helps us identify the timing of the next update. So these, the work that's ongoing or about to get kicked off is largely because of that identification through the master plan annual reports. So the first one that's ongoing is the mobility master plan. You recently had a workshop where you got to talk about the most, kind of the latest on this, but basically we're integrating 3 of our existing mobility related plans. This will become the official master plan for mobility, replacing those other plans. Kind of the focus here is achieving superior mobility, which is established in the comprehensive plan. And our focus is really on shifting the focus from moving people to moving people instead of moving vehicles. So thinking more multimodally and how we can give people options for moving around, and not you have to get in your car to go from one place to another, but what's another option if that's something that you choose to do. So your role in this, again, is providing feedback on the policy recommendations, which is what you've been doing along the way as we've brought pieces of the plan to you over the last couple of years, and then ultimately make a recommendation to City Council. So as I mentioned, we've had several joint workshops with the City Council where we've gone through the introduction and then review and concurrence on the goals, and then most recently the review and concurrence on the strategies and metrics. We're super excited because this project is wrapping up, and so we anticipate bringing this back to you in early next year. I think maybe in like the January, February timeframe, where we'll be looking for you to make a recommendation to City Council on the plan. And then we have the Facilities Master Plan, which in this time around we're calling the Integrated Facilities Master Plan and Workspace Design Initiative. So through this Facilities Master Plan, this is basically where the city traditionally will look at all of its buildings and look at how do we accommodate staff in the future? You know, so it's looking at places like City Hall and the PD building and the City Hall Annex, and kind of what is the future of those spaces and what is the future space needs of our staff. But we're kind of expanding the scope this time around and looking at it from a different perspective. So we're thinking about it in terms of the spaces that we have. Does it propagate the culture and values that we have as an organization? How does it do with retention and recruiting? We also are looking at, are there ways that our buildings can be revenue generators? Like, can we, lease out a small portion of a building so that it can be an incubator space? And then there's also several other items that we're addressing, but this is a little bit of a different scope than we typically would do through a facilities master plan. So like with the other master plans, we'll be looking to you to provide some feedback on policy recommendations and ultimately make a recommendation to City Council. We anticipate doing some stakeholder engagement somewhere around summer of next year. This project literally is just kicking off. We have the kickoff meeting this week. So have a little bit of time before we're ready to get in front of anybody on that. So with that, unless you have any questions, I'm going to hand it off to Lauren. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Made it. It's touch and go.
Okay, I'm going to walk us through the development process y'all are mostly used to. I've seen some of our case types, and then staff's role, a little bit touch on that. So types of zoning review: standard rezoning, plan development district, conditional use permits, and our subdivision platting. That is primarily the commission's role when we come before you and bring a case before you at your meetings. The commission on those three zoning reviews is the recommending body to City Council, and then, as Lisa was touching on, the subdivision platting, you are the final authority on the subdivision platting in the city. So the guidance, some of our guidance is from the development code. So chapter 2 includes our zoning regulations, which are a lot of your standard bulk regulations. So that's going to be your standard residential zoning districts that we use to review residential building permits, and then our commercial standard zoning districts that we have take in and review permits with. So this looks at land use, landscaping, parking criteria, as I said, the kind of bulk regulations, your setbacks, and how those can be applied. I mentioned the rezoning, CUP, PDs. Those are different processes than when someone's going to come forward with just their standard zoning district and it complies with everything in that district. Chapter 5 of the development code are the subdivision regulations. So this is where we get our guidance for general land plans, which we don't see a lot of anymore these days, and the subdivision platting. So this will also give us minimum requirements for the ETJ. There's limited regulation that we have. We obviously don't have zoning in the ETJ, so we lean on this chapter to look at some of the minimum requirements, setbacks, utilities, infrastructure, those kind of things. So a zoning case. So property owner or the city can initiate a rezoning. The standard rezoning we've seen, I don't remember your most recent case, but you can go from one standard district. So in this case, I had the business office district to the B2. That's the general business district. I think the most recent one we looked at was the former 24-hour fitness. So they were changing the standard zoning on that, the property owner. Conditional use permits. So this is guidance that specific land uses in the matrix can be requested. So they're not permitted outright. It may need some additional evaluation by staff and by the commission and council on more of a site-by-site determination to see if there's any mitigation that needs to be in place. So CUP would be, again, recommending body to the council. Part of that would include, the conditional use permit ordinance includes usually the site layout plan, building elevations sometimes, and a landscape plan, so that we're able to take a look at any mitigation that might be needed at the site. Additional setbacks, additional landscaping, height restrictions, those kind of things. And then plan development districts. So this is our more custom zoning district. We look to the future land use plan and the development code for guidance on this. And, their purpose is really to facilitate development beyond what could be built in your standard, BO or B2 zoning district, whether it's a mix of uses or unique characteristics of the development. So the ordinance itself would have the specific development criteria, layout plans, elevations, use list, and that's what the commission would review and make recommendation on. And then subdivision process, so general land plans, and I'll touch on each of these in an additional slide, are preliminary and final plats, which the commission reviews, and then our more administrative plat process for minor and amending plats, which I will also touch on. Those are done at the administrative level that the commission does not review. And then infrastructure construction plans. These are public infrastructure plans that are reviewed by city staff by the time of final plat submittal. So that's going to be for new public streets, utilities, and our drainage. So this, sure.
Explain that last one again, if you will.
Okay.
Because I don't recall us ever reviewing an infrastructure plan. That's not our role. That is the role of the city, right?
It's the role of the city. It's reviewed by city staff. It's a requirement
Of the plat.
It's a requirement before we will process final plat.
Okay.
So you all won't see a final plat unless we have construction plans that have been reviewed. It moves in parallel with the final plat and the specific easements. That's why sometimes when engineering staff will come up and explain to y'all why an easement is in a place, because they've seen the infrastructure plans and so they know what's going to be in the certain location.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you.
So general land plan. This is health fair. So just as an example, this takes a look at a large area. We have general land plans for Telfair, for Imperial, for Riverstone, as an example, and breaks it down by figuring out where the land uses are going to be. This is where a developer would take a large, master plan area and see, where's our residential going to go? Where's the commercial going to go? Where are some of our open spaces, schools? What's appropriate for buffers? In those areas. Streets, typically they'll have the proposed kind of major street network laid out on the general land plan as well. So the P&Z will make a recommendation on this, and council will take action on general land plans. We don't see a lot of them anymore as much because we don't have thousands of acres of land left to review, but you all have seen some of this in the past. Again, back to the plat review. So we utilize the Chapter 5 subdivision regulations I mentioned, as well as the development handbook guidelines. You all touched on a little bit of that when Lisa was talking about the, if you approve with conditions or disapprove, some of that documentation can come from the code, the subdivision regulations, or the development handbook regulations, which is what applicants and staff use to evaluate plats. So again, this is the kind of state law mandating the timelines and the specific processes for approval and disapproval. So just kind of briefly quick touch on that. Preliminary and final. So these are the two types of plats primarily that the commission focuses on. Preliminary plats are more of the overall layout. So they'll have an overall street layout. The lot layouts, you'll see those lot kind of diagrams where you have the box exhibit on those. It'll show building setbacks and kind of a general utility layout, but not the final easements. More of the detail comes with the final plat that follows the preliminary. So if there's any conditions from the preliminary plat, those will have to be addressed on the final plat. Specific easement locations, the layouts, dimensions, the callouts, the certification blocks, all those more technical components. The final plat does have to be prepared by an RPLS, registered professional land surveyor, whereas a preliminary plat does not. So it's just a higher level of detail to be recorded and ultimately what's built. And the administrative plats, so these are our minor and amending plats. They are authorized to be reviewed administratively by staff, and then the city manager and the mayor will sign them before we release them to applicants for recordation at the county. There's some basic criteria, a minimum number of lots that you can create. You have to have access to utilities, public utilities at each lot, and public access, so streets to be able to qualify. You can't be extending additional public utilities to qualify for an administrative plat. So some kind of easy examples are just vacant commercial properties you might see, in the business park or even along Highway 6, if there's any that just needs to be platted for the first time, but they already have utilities and kind of that core infrastructure in place. Then final slide here. So Airport Zoning Commission. We don't talk about this a lot, but there is a chapter in the Development Code that talks about the Planning and Zoning Commission serving, if they have to, as the Airport Zoning Commission, as it would relate to land use. So there are two examples. AZ01 and AZ02 are actual sort of overlay-ish zoning districts that are on land adjacent to the airport that provides guidance on what land uses could be appropriate next to an airport. We don't have to activate you all as that very often, ever, but we would have a separate workshop and a specific orientation for you all and staff, frankly, if we needed to have a case. And then the Zoning Board of Adjustment is charged with hearing any height variances if there's a discrepancy on a height in a property near an airport that is above what the FAA would approve. So the ZBA would take that role. Move into staff role, unless anybody had any questions on any of that. Okay. So real quick, just 2 or 3 slides on this. So staff's role is the liaison to the commission. We will coordinate with other city staff to review any cases that come before you. We provide the staff reports, presentations, public hearing notices, all the meeting prep, and then come to the meeting to help guide and advise the commission on recommendations for the city council. We work closely with engineering and public works a lot on more of our technical studies, so traffic impact analysis, drainage impact analysis studies that happen prior to us bringing a case before the commission. And the Development Review Committee. So this is a staff-led review committee that meets every week, each week, for a couple hours. We chair it along with the engineering team. It's attended by Public Works, Traffic, Fire, our permits and inspections, economic development, everybody involved kind of in the development review process. And we review and discuss every single development item that's submitted to the city. So this can be your site plans, TIAs, drainage studies, the infrastructure construction plans, and then of course every zoning item and plat that comes before the commission is also taken kind of through this process. As part of this, we also offer weekly meetings with external applicants and developers, so they can come in and present their projects to us, and we can kind of do a preliminary review with them and provide feedback and direction. Or If we've provided a lot of comments to somebody that is doing a big, large project, they might come in and want to talk with us about some of our comments that we made. So that's a service that we provide as a city. And then finally, our responsibilities after commission and council action. So plat recordation, we will work with the property owner and their team on getting the final plat recorded, or the administrative plat if we're the ones reviewing it. Site plan packages. I know we talk a lot about site plan packages with you all, and building permits review as they come out of conditional use permits or plan development districts, and that's the responsibility of the staff after the ordinance has been passed by city council. We take it forward through the development process, and then again, inspections. All of the departments are involved in some capacity on inspections throughout prior to construction, throughout construction, and then upon the final certificate of occupancy. That happens with new ground up construction as well as public infrastructure. Our inspectors go out and review the public infrastructure when it's getting installed. And then just kind of continued work, and that's a lot of times with our code enforcement group. And, if they're out in the field and they find something that might be out of compliance, we work with them to bring sites back into compliance, whether it be with their conditional use permit ordinance, their plan development ordinance, or something on a standard commercial or residential site that's not in compliance with the development code. I think that was my last slide. Anything on that? Pass it off to Trish. All right.
Thank you, Lauren.
Good evening, commissioners. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you guys about the Texas Open Meetings Act and the conflict of interest. I know a lot of you guys already taken that Texas Open Meetings Act, correct? Training. If you haven't, there's going to be a slide about the training. All right, so this is a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, okay, so Texas Open Meetings Act is going to apply to all meetings. Okay, so every meeting has to be open to the public, except if there is an exception that's authorized you to go into closed sessions, then you can go into closed sessions. But otherwise, everything has to be done in public. Okay, when does the act apply? Anytime you guys have a gathering. It may be when you have a quorum to discuss city business or to deliberate public business, and it also may apply in a case of a walking quorum. We'll talk about walking quorum a little bit. And it does not apply to a social gathering or when a workshop if the city business is not being discussed, or public business is not being discussed. Notice requirements. That's why we have the agenda. Your agenda serves as a notice. We post that within 72 hours of the meeting, and the notice has to have the place, the date, the time, the hours, the subject that's going to be discussed. The more specific or more subject matter, the more important the subject, the more detail we have to provide. We can't just say, okay, we're going to discuss personnel issue. That's not sufficient. You have to specify what it is. Hiring, firing, or in your case, it will be a plat, or you're going to talk about certain, for instance, we're considering of a certain development, we have to list that, right? So that way the public who may have some interest in that particular this item may be here to put in their input or public comments. So that's the reason why we are required to post and provide the subject matter, the hours and place, and that's exactly what you see on your agenda. Why the chair always have to read the agenda, the date, the time, and the place or location, right? And the public comment or public forum section, it can be generic. It says public comment or public forum. That would be sufficient under the act.
record keeping, we have to maintain a minute, and that's the reason why you have a minute, and you guys vote on your minute. The minute has to be written, but it does not have to be exactly what verbatim of what the discussion. So it can be a brief minute, but it has to state what vote was taken, how it was taken, the action was taken. Okay, so that's the reason why your minute is not as detailed as we have a recording. So we record everything, so therefore we don't have to have a verbatim minutes of exactly what you were talking about. That's so in order to have convened the meeting, you have to have a quorum. If you don't have a quorum, you do not, we have to cancel the meeting. So we always look for a quorum first before we start a meeting. Any members who wish to participate video conference, first we have to have a quorum present in the room before you can participate via video, right? But anytime you participate video conference, your video has to be, the audio and video have to be on at all times. If you don't, then you'll be marked absent. And you have to have a remote, must have a two-way audio and video communication during the entire time. Okay. If during the meeting, if you happen to have a public come up and decide to ask a question, you are not to engage in the discussion. The only thing you can do is sit and listen. You do not answer the questions. The only thing that you can say is state the policy, state the fact, and ask for it to be put on an agenda for future discussion if you decide to discuss that item. If you don't decide to not to have that discussion, then you do not do anything. You just don't respond. Okay, don't engage. Okay, for closed executive session, like I said earlier, you have to be authorized by the statute. In your case, probably the one that might be applicable be consultation with the attorney, because a lot of other stuff is economic development, personnel. There's a lot of others, but this might be the one that might be applicable to you. In order for you to go into closed executive sessions, you have to be in open session first. You have to have a quorum. You start in the open meeting, and then you can cite the section while you go into closed executive sessions. You cite the law, and you have to maintain a certified agenda or tape recording of the closed meeting, except for you don't record when you're doing a consultation with the attorney. You don't. Okay, for enforcement, what happens if you violate the act? If you violate the act, your action will be voidable. That means it's not automatically void, it's voidable. So if someone comes up and sue and take action, file a lawsuit against the city, then they can challenge your action and they can ask for your action to be voided, but it's not an automatic, right? That's a civil actions, and there's also criminal penalties if you decide to violate the act. So here are the 4 violations. You can participate in a closed meetings that is not being taped, or certified agenda, disclosing the certified agenda, or conspiring to circumvent the act by engaging in walking quorum. Nowadays, we have a lot of social media, Twitter or Facebook, text messaging. You're engaging, talking to each other, trying to get, everyone to vote one way or the other, deliberating without being in open meeting, right? In the public. So, that's, like I said, I put down the penalty there from $100 to $500 fine and or 1 to 6 months in jail. So we don't want to engage in that type of activity. So, and the last one is calling or aiding in or participating in unlawful closed meetings. So we do not want to do that either. So those are the 4 major violations of the Open Meetings Act. So here's the open meetings training that I alluded to earlier. You have to complete this training within the 90 days of you being appointed. And I think I remember Ms. Commissioner Patel, you came to our most recent training. I don't know of anyone else who, has everyone completed the training? Okay, online, yes. Just make sure you print out the certificate and file it with the city secretary, so we'll have that on record. If you have not done so, just please check out the Attorney General's website and complete that training within 90 days. Okay, conflict of interest. You need to abstain and from participation in discussion and voting on the following matter. If you have a matter in front of you that might give you a personal or financial benefit to you or to your family members or to a business that or employer, wherever you're working now, you have to abstain from engage in that discussion and voting. You have a substantial interest in a subdivided tract that's on a plat, you have to abstain from participating in that. You also have, if there's an interest, if you have a real property that is somehow is perceivably having an action that might give you a special economic effect on your real property. If you live somewhere close by to the development, then you have to abstain from engaging in the discussion or participation in that item.
So we had that come up, I think, recently,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that was that a proper example of it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And if you have a substantial interest in another business that has one or more business transaction with the business entity involved in the matter, that's before you have to abstain. Yes.
Okay, question about the first one. So the last sentence says distinguishable from its effect on the public. So does that mean, let's use the example of where you're doing rezoning and the commissioner lives within the notification area for that proposed change. They have to recuse themselves no matter what, even though the effect on their property potentially from the zoning change is going to have the same effect as the effect on other members of the public who are in that range?
It's depend on how, because of the fact that you're voting, the fact that you're going to be voting on that matter, whether you're voting yes or no, it's going to have, because you sit on the board, so
Yeah.
you actually have an influence on how that matter, the result of that item, right?
Okay.
So that's a different than what a general public would not be able to have that. So that's the reason why you have to recuse yourself or abstain from participation, because the general public does not have the ability to come and sit on the board and make a decisions that may affect their property value. So
Sure.
that's the
But a
distinction.
zoning change is going to affect all the properties within that area the same, whether the commissioner has an ownership interest in one or not. I'm getting hung up on that last phrase, distinguishable from its effect on the public.
Yeah, that would be, I would think that would be something that how you vote on that item.
Oh,
or-
you're doing a plat and you want to make yours larger or something. Okay, I get it. And then so for something like that zoning change, is the safe rule to follow if you received a notice, then you should consider or you should talk to you and consider
Abstain.
recusing?
Yes.
Okay. But if you don't get a notice, what if you live across the street from the notice area or something like that, then there's no expectation that you recuse?
I think there's a perception that might come about. But I mean, I think the statute requires 200 feet, right? For notice. Yeah, for public hearing notice.
Okay.
The only thing I might add, I don't know if anybody's would be if there is a doubt, if there's something like maybe this could be perceived, always visit
You
the
ask.
city attorney and ask,
Sure.
and they will guide you in whatever the appropriate direction is.
Yeah, so when you abstain, you have to leave the room. You cannot participate and file an affidavit with the city secretary, and can't participate any further discussion or voting on that matter. So what happens if you vote on a matter that you have a conflict? then the action is not voidable. It's not void, it's voidable, right? So we go back to the same situation previously. So if there is more, if there are 9 commissioners present and is only one that, and you voted for it, it still passed, right? It's unanimous. So it doesn't matter if your vote, is not, if you have a 4 to 5 vote and your one vote is the one that passes, then we'll talk about it might be voidable. But if everyone here and that one vote doesn't sway one way or the other, if it still passes or it still failed, then it's not really have that much of an impact. But if you fail to, if you have a conflict and you fail to abstain and file the affidavit and participate, then there's like criminal violations also that's included. Okay, so if here's the important point. If there is no quorum, there's no meeting. So the first thing we want to make sure if there's a quorum before we start the meeting, and each commissioner who's present must, in accordance to our ordinance, you have to vote on the items before you, unless you have abstained from the discussion and voting of the matter. You cannot discuss any items that's not on the agenda. And if the applicant contacts you, then just refer them to staff. And so to avoid the walking quorum, I would say for you guys not to ever reply to all. If you get an email from staff, don't reply to all, because that might get you into the walking quorum situation and have a discussions of some sort. So we try to remind commissioners not to reply to all correspondences. Yes.
On the second point, I'm going to be clear about this. So unless you recuse yourself and step out of a meeting, when something comes up to a vote, you have to vote yay or nay,
Yes,
correct?
correct.
So there's not also a way that you can abstain,
Correct.
correct? So if you're in the room,
Then you have to
then
vote.
you have to vote yay. or
Yes,
nay.
correct.
We have had that one come up at
Yes.
least once.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
All right, thank you.
I can't hear. Is videotape? Even though, yes, you have to leave the room. Because we don't want you to somehow sit in the back and nod or, shake your head, influencing the other commissioners. So you have to leave the room.
Just more clarification on that. I've never abstained, but I just want to, it says unless the commissioner abstains from discussing and voting on the matter. So if you sit in your chair, are present in the room, don't engage in the conversation, then you can abstain.
No.
No, you,
have only if you recuse and leave the room. If you're in the room, you have to vote.
correct. If you're in the room, you have to vote. If you abstained, then you don't have to vote.
Okay, I don't read it that way, but because it says unless.
Unless the commissioner abstained from discussing and voting on the
If you had
matter.
a conflict and you've abstained, right? You've left the meeting.
No,
Right.
that's a recusal, not an abstain.
I think there's a language thing there.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's why I asked, Tim, that's why I asked about that.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be clear that unless the way I'm understanding this as explained is unless you recuse, you have to vote yay or nay.
Yeah.
There is no, if you're in the room,
If
for
you're in the room,
discussion,
you have to.
vote. You have to record a vote.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
You have to.
I've never done it. I just was curious.
Yeah.
Yes, we've had that situation.
That's why I asked, because I wanted to, because you could read that slide as saying that, but I don't think that's the rule.
Yeah, that's what that's came out straight out of the city ordinance.
I need to wordsmith that.
We may have to revise it, but that statement straight out.
We get the intent, and
That's interesting.
we've had someone try
Yeah.
who was in the room for the
Right,
discussion. We
right.
told him you can't do that. Then you'll just get a general reminder.
Abstain is an option. Is it an option?
There is an option.
I have a question. So at the beginning of the meetings, you present meeting minutes, right?
Yes.
And if someone has not attended that meeting, how can they approve or disapprove of those meeting minutes? And in that instant, you're sitting on the chair in presence of everyone, you're being videotaped, you have to abstain. How do
No,
you
because
approve and not approve of meeting
watch the
minutes?
meeting
You can watch the meeting.
and
Yeah.
you can review the minutes.
But that is the first day of that commission. Like you did not watch that meeting.
Okay,
You
let's say-
don't know.
Sure, let's say I missed the meeting tonight,
Yeah.
okay? And in 2 weeks, I get a packet of the minutes. I can go
Mhm.
online and watch the meeting.
But you didn't go online and watch the meeting, but you are in the room now and the meeting minutes are being presented. What do you do then?
Well,
You can either
I would
vote
watch
yes or
the
no.
meeting.
Huh? You can either vote yes or
You
no.
could vote yes or no, right? I mean, I think with that, to me, that is more incumbent on the individual who misses the meeting to educate themselves, like we would expect them to educate themselves on anything else on the packet. For example, a commissioner could get their packet and not read it
Uh-huh.
and show up to the meeting and record a vote. It's the same situation. I would say that person needs to approach the role differently, but I wouldn't say they don't get to vote.
Okay, if the day the commissioner arrives is the first day on the job, then what?
Then what? What's the,
I mean, there's this person that arrives at the job. that's the
you're
first-
you're asked to vote on the minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
You got the agenda. The minutes are in the packet, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't attend, so how can you approve or disapprove?
because they're all record, I mean, my answer is the same. You can record it. And again, I don't see that that's different. This is not, I mean, I don't see how that's any different from someone who doesn't read the packet and then votes. You shouldn't approach the role that way. It's incumbent on people who are commissioned to educate themselves on the items that are before the commission. That's my personal view.
I'll volunteer my personal experience. When I first came on this board, ZBA, Tract 5 was in play. And, it was a firestorm. And, I forget it was Lisa or, just who it was, Kathy, who suggested, you're going to be appointed, your first night is such and such. Why don't you come to 1 or 2 meetings before that and kind of get familiar with the topic and so forth. So I know I attended at least 1 meeting before I was actually up on the DS. It's,
And you can watch them all too.
Right.
I think that was recommended to me when I
But,
first came on. Just watch.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario you pose, but I think the answer lies somewhere in our personal responsibility to be prepared when we come to the meeting, even if it's our first.
Are you still good about that?
Any other questions or discussion?
All right, hopefully I think we may have exhausted our quota on questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we move on, I would just like to say a few things. First of all, thank you very much to Lisa and Ruth and Lauren and Tricia for these presentations. I think even as a returning member and a returning chair, this is very, very helpful. So thank you for all the time and effort. And as always, thank you very much to the city staff who may be here and may not be here, who contribute to the items that are presented to the commission and to your presentations tonight. So thank you for all the hard work and for the education. All right, now we will go to item 5, reports. Do we have a liaison report for the November 1 City Council meeting?
Yeah, that's me. Pretty short and sweet meeting. They introduced a new police chief formally to the public and to council. So that was nice. They honored 2 Astros legends, Terry Poole and Tal Smith, gave them a recognition and honored them. And the rest of it was they were in a closed executive session to look at appointments for the Independent Ethics Review Board. the 4B Corporation and the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And then the rest of the meeting, when they came back out, was just confirming those appointments in public. And that was pretty much it. The consent agenda wasn't much material to us. Yeah, it's a pretty easy meeting.
Awesome. Thank you. 5B, city staff report.
Thank you for your time and thank you for joining us a little bit earlier. If you didn't grab something to eat, take a to-go plate because there's a lot of food over there that I see. But thank you for coming, being able to join us earlier than the typical time. So appreciate that.
You bet. And one other item. So you mentioned a November 15th date.
Yeah.
I don't think I received the email.
I can explain.
Okay.
I already knew that the two of y'all were gonna be out of town, so we're gonna follow up with y'all later.
Fair
when
enough.
you're back in town.
Okay, because I looked and I wanted to make sure if it went out, that's fine. You're correct. I'm done. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry, I had a couple of things. Sorry.
Whoa. No.
I know. He wants to get, that's it. So we wanted to remind you, I know Ruth mentioned it, but to provide, if you have not yet provided your availability for that November 15th date, I think we're trying to finalize those. So please do that. And you can see Ruth after if you have any questions. So your next meeting is December 13th. So as a reminder, we only have one meeting in November and December. So you are free the rest of the month. Happy Thanksgiving. But the next meeting will be December 13th. So we'll likely have the Tarrington final development plan coming back to you, and then a couple of other zoning items that we think are queuing up as well. So it'll have some stuff on the meeting for you. And that will be the only meeting for you for December as well. So just one more meeting to go this year. And then lastly, I know we mentioned the Open Meetings Act training. So if you haven't done that online, please do that. That's for anybody that has been either newly appointed or reappointed to the commission. If you could please complete that within the time frame, that would be appreciated. So thank you.
Okay, any other business?
Motion to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn
Second.
by Vice Chairman Simeon. I've got a second. Commissioner Smith, all in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Recording stopped.